Here's what you should know about your local housing market in this week's Market Update. It's here. It's finally here. We've got the last full week of the final push before holiday season starts next week with Thanksgiving. Typically, once we hit Thanksgiving, we tend to see a substantial slowdown in the market. We see markedly less inventory. And that's going to be very important because we're already in a low inventory environment. So it's going to be interesting to see this past week, that final push before we start competing with the holidays. So if we're already behind where we want to be, we're going to then be even more behind. Typically, we like to go strong into the holiday season to withstand that slowdown. But let's see what we're looking at this week as we head into that seasonal slowdown. This past week, we're looking at stats in Morristown, Chatham, Madison, Harding, Marsh Plains, Mendham, Chester, Bernardsville, Basking Ridge, and Randolph. So this past week, we saw 26 homes come on the market. That is a 10% decrease over last week. So we're seeing less homes coming on the market. Out of those, 15 were houses and 11 of those were condos or townhouses. So that's a pretty substantial makeup of condos or townhouses. While there is a substantial demand for condos and townhouses, I like to see most of that supply in single-family houses because that's where a bulk of the demand is. Average list price is up substantially this week. Average list price is $1,323,000 this past week, which is a 69% increase over the prior week. Total inventory, we currently see 176 homes actively on the market, and that is a 10% decrease of last week, which was already substantially low. So last week we made that dip below 200 homes actively on the market for these towns, and now we're seeing even lower than that. And my anticipation would be as we get into this holiday season, it's going to be even lower. So sellers, keep that in mind. While we typically see a slower activity during the holiday season, you've got a lot less competition. So while I see a lot of people say, I'm going to wait until the spring, just be aware. We should be prepping your house to be able to pounce, because once you get too far into spring, you see a huge influx in the inventory, and that absorption rate, the months of homes available to sale, is going to spike substantially. So while you do want to be in a market where there's substantial buyer demand, when that market gets flooded with inventory, as it typically does in the spring, you've got a lot more competition. That month's supply of inventory goes up significantly. So do keep that in mind if you're thinking of buying or selling, but especially selling. We should be having conversations now if we have not done so already. Sold homes. We saw 40 homes sell this past week in these towns. That is a 38% increase over last week. The average list price of these homes was $1,185,000, and the average sale price of these homes was $1,283,000. So this past week, homes sold for an average in these towns of 5.6% above the list price. And notably, looking at in towns individually, we saw only 2 towns where homes sold below list price. That was Mendham and Bernardsville, and they barely sold below list price. We saw 0.3% below list price in Mendham, and we saw 0.2% below the list price in Basking Ridge. Otherwise, the rest of these towns ranging anywhere from 0.6% above list price in Morristown, so not that crazy, but we saw all the way up to 21% above the list price in Harding this past week. And we saw other figures, Chatham 10.7% above list price, Madison 8.9% above list price. So we still are seeing pretty substantial bidding wars going on. Average days on market for the home sold, All right, I'm back. Average days on market for homes sold this past week was 30 days on market. That's a 38% increase over the prior week in days on market, surprisingly. And then under contract. Once again, as always, under contract is the least complete data, but the most current data. That is what's happening currently in the market. Solds are a little bit lagged for what's happening. Under contract is what is currently happening this past week. So we saw 31 homes go under contract this past week. That's a 24% increase over the prior week. The average list price of those homes was only $833,000. And then the median days on market, we saw a decrease in that. So homes were selling quicker this past week, and that was 25 days on the market. So we will not be doing a market update next week on Black Friday. It's going to be Thanksgiving week, not only because I'm going to be busy recovering from Thanksgiving and putting up my Christmas decorations, but it's Thanksgiving week. There's not going to be a lot to read into that data. It's probably going to be very incomplete. We're probably going to see a very little activity this next week in our local housing market. So thanks so much for checking in with me. I hope you have a phenomenal Thanksgiving. I hope you have a nice, relaxing Thanksgiving weekend, and hopefully a pretty chill week next week overall. So I hope you have a great weekend, a great Thanksgiving, great holiday week, and I'll catch you guys again in 2 weeks.